For us to blend into human society, it's basically like walking on an endless tightrope. You're on the edge of advancing or falling at every second of every minute. If you trip, you fall straight down into the abyss. Tokyo Ghoul's in-universe narrative progression is twisted and unnatural. What I mean by in-universe narrative progression is that of how things unfold to the characters themselves, not to us the readers. The narrative powers of this world loom in the shadows, advancing more and more as the plot progresses to a point of suffocation. Alongside this, the parents of Tokyo Ghoul impose fates of tragedy upon their children constantly. The chain of causality is malformed. It feels as if Malevolent itself is pushing the plot forward. A major theme throughout Tokyo Ghoul is that the world is wrong. Every direction, every choice our characters make seems to end in suffering. This video serves as a little dive into discovering why it's supposedly wrong, alongside why the chain of causality is so terrible. Our first introduction to the world of Tokyo Ghoul is with Kaneki and Hide, two university students out for a drink. Kaneki's love of books is heavily showcased alongside his feelings for a girl named Rize. His appreciation of books is a major reason that Kaneki falls for Rize. Though, unknown to both Kaneki himself and the audience at this time, Kaneki's upbringing had solidified him with a tragic fate. Buried deep into his subconscious lies the truth of his mother's abuse. Reading with recontextualization, it's obvious that Kaneki would fall for Rize. Both her and his mother are incredibly similar not only in terms of appearance but in the role they play throughout the story, looming over Kaneki and appearing when he's at his most vulnerable. A common theme throughout Tokyo Ghoul is that of the cycles of violence and trauma, parents inflicting wounds on their children that they can't escape from. Kaneki's mother imbues him with a fractured psyche from the get-go. His mother was a coward and afraid of solitude. Ken inherited that trait. His inability to fully commit to choices leaves him fractured and delays his self-actualization. Rize invades Kaneki's mind and influences his quote-unquote choices. Had Rize not been present in his mind during Yamari's torture, Kaneki would have continued to play the pacifist. Not only did his mother's influence play a major part, but the passing of his father was the reason they even started talking. A quote-unquote common hobby between the two, Kaneki's love of books and narratives stems from his father's book collection. Passing away when Kaneki was very young, he barely even remembers him. The vacant spot of a father figure is filled with a love for literature. The abuse from his mother and lack of presence from his father had him on a silver platter for Rize to encounter. It leads us to question if Kaneki even had a say in the matter. His actions controlled by things he isn't aware of lead him to suffering, forced and pushed to play the main character. Throughout the story, Kaneki has multiple parental figures. Parents are people that are supposed to help us. We grow from their actions. However, growth is not always inherently positive. People can grow in horrible ways. Just because a parental figure is an awful person, that doesn't dissolve the fact that they are a parental figure. From Mr. Yoshimura, who attempts to assist and cultivate Kaneki into a one-eyed ghoul for a positive aspect, to the 13th Ward's Jason, who forcibly places Kaneki in a cage to break down and torture for his own sadistic pleasure. However, a major point that carries through to every parental dynamic with Kaneki is that Yamari is also in that cage. He's just as trapped as Kaneki. The torture he inflicts is only because he himself was tortured. Mr. Yoshimura is caught between his new life and his old one, stuck to fend off the CCG in order for those he cares for to survive and flourish. Stuck inside a cage, you can't run anywhere. But the most prominent showcase of this is with Rize. Rize exemplifies desire without reflection. Her appetite, freedom, and chaos brought her a special prison within the narrative. Stripped of all agency thanks to her counterpart, extending her freedom to the fullest extent, Causality removed her freedom entirely. Her physical body being used as nothing but a prop for the plot. Her characterization comes from everything but Rize herself. The chain of causality has an ironic sense of quote-unquote poetic justice. There are many other examples of characters and their freedom being questionable regarding their parents. Toka and Ayato, Mutsuki, Urie, Amon, Juzo, Hinami, Akira, the list goes on. Everyone seems to be influenced by something malevolent, as if malice itself is driving the plot forward. The world itself is wrong, but why? Who or what is making it wrong, and is anyone trying to fix it? If the world itself is corrupted, we have to dissect who's controlling the world. Those with the most power both narratively and in universe. As I said in the intro, the narrative powers of this world lie in the shadows, beneath aliases and guises. A battle for the rule over authorial power carries out throughout a large chunk of the series. The prominent figureheads of this feud being Sentakatsuki, aka Eto Yoshimura, and Nimura Furuta. Eto Yoshimura, daughter to Mr. Yoshimura, or cousin. Despite her narrative power, she's not exempt from a terrible parent-child relationship. She was born and quote-unquote raised in the 24th Ward. The 24th Ward being the remnants of an age-long past, where ghouls had risen up in rebellion against a world that was not made for them. She grew up hating the world, surrounded by the dregs of her ostracized kin. Her father Kuzan had been put in a difficult situation by an organization known as V. V had ordered Kuzan to execute Eto's human mother and had abandoned Eto in the 24th Ward. Her parental relationship had been torn apart by V, where Kaneki's parental relationship had set him up to be Rize. Eto's dynamic had a third-party interference, one that ruined the life of the Yoshimura family and set Eto down a path to destroy V. She sought to raise the world that put herself and the ghouls there to the ground. Creating a ghoul organization known as the Aogiri Tree, she raised the flag of rebellion against the CCG. On a little side note, the meaning behind the organization name Aogiri Tree ties heavily into Eto's character and most ghouls as a whole. Aogiri means phoenix tree and has kanji to it, however it's generally written with kana, which is another Japan-specific writing system consisting of hiragana and katakana. Kana is a system which works by phonetically spelling out the word. So, dissecting the word aogiri, we have ao, meaning blue, a metaphor commonly associated with youth, and kiri, which means to cut, literally cutting into or apart one's youth, forcing both maturity and age onto the subject. Obviously very representative of ghouls, and most specifically Eto. Though it's not just ghouls who have their youth taken, they most certainly participate in forcing maturity on humans. Eto simply serves as the pinnacle of this trope, as one of the driving forces in the world, and as the strongest ghoul in the Aogiri tree, she eventually locked horns against the CCG's most glorified investigator, Kisho Arima. Though in secrecy, the two collaborate for the eventual betterment of the world. Eto's strength as a ghoul is impressive, but her true power lies in her stories. The dynamic between Eto and Arima can be separated into the author and her pen, or story and paper. The Black Goat's Egg, a story written by Sentakatsuki, details how a son realizes and accepts the same cruel impulse within him as his mother. I don't need to point out how this relates to Kaneki, rather pointing out the duality between Eto and Kaneki. Eto can be seen as a pseudo-parent to Kaneki. The same impulse for violence lies in both their characters. Would that impulse have been there if Kaneki hadn't read her books? Or if Eto even wrote them? Not only did both of his parents have a hand in him meeting Rize, but the actual literature they bonded over made it a narrative absolute for him to go down that path. Narratives themselves are used and weaponized, a point I'll touch more on later. It's only after enduring grueling events that break Kaneki's psyche do we see these connections. Much like the actual plot of the story and uncovering the truth behind the organizations within it, Eto seeks destruction to reveal truth. The truth that the CCG was founded by ghouls. Similar to how Kaneki's psyche is broken and beaten to reveal its truest self. Their dynamic is pain turned revelation. One reason for why the world is wrong is that truth comes at a price of pain. Some put the value of not enduring that pain for a false pleasure. Some seek absolute destruction for the truth to be showcased worldwide. To better understand either the world or yourself, The truth is a necessary factor in accomplishing that. Tokyo Ghoul's world is shrouded in mystery. A major enjoyment of reading through the story is theorizing and figuring out the secrets of the world and the plot. Both Eto and Arima serve as major factors in revealing that truth, and the role of a parent and author are embedded in them both individually and as a dynamic. Where Eto mostly symbolizes the author in the duo, Arima represents the parental role. As I mentioned earlier, Kaneki's relationship with his father was cut short due to his unfortunate passing. Kaneki's love of books initially functions as a metaphor for escapism and moral idealism, retreating into narratives where suffering is aestheticized. Pain produces wisdom, protagonists endure and are rewarded with meaning. Books are Kaneki's shield against reality. Arima's presence is physically absent a lot of the time, yet ever so quietly the droplets of Eto's pen start to form a character. Through flashbacks, praise or fear from other characters, he's left intentionally ambiguous, a blank sheet for the reader to paint a picture of. The first interaction Kaneki has with his major parental figures ends in his quote-unquote death, happening at both the beginning and ending of the OG series, signifying a new beginning for Kaneki. Rize killed Kaneki's life as a human, Arima killed his life as a ghoul. Kaneki and parental relationships are filled with violence and suffering. However, like with Rize, there's a solemn bond being weaved between the two. Kaneki recites a poem by Hakushu that moves Arima. Their connection through literature is the backbone of their relationship, exemplified through Heisei and Arima. The stench of crusted ghoul blood stains Arima's soul. Likewise, Kaneki's hands are far from clean. Fate deems the legacy of Arima to be one steeped in death. Both of Kaneki's new parental cornerstones are awful, to put it bluntly. Though where they differentiate is in Rize having no remorse for her actions. Arima never wanted this life. Rize signifies pure destruction, whereas Arima is destruction for a cause. Rize's altercation with Kaneki led to Eto finding herself another muse. The collaboration between Eto and Arima evolved since Eto found herself someone to sit on the throne of the One-Eyed King, meeting Rize to becoming noticed by Eto, to dying at the hands of Arima, to becoming his student. The foundations of Kaneki's self made him the perfect candidate to become the One-Eyed King. Kaneki was the supreme subject for the chain of causality to run with. All he needed was one singular push. Eto and Arima represent the bridge between peace, the eventual betterment of the world. For a world like that to exist, the old must first be torn down to make way for the new. Though the cost is an uncountable death toll, I mentioned before that there were multiple narrative powers vying for control over the story. Analysing those with the most of that power would give us reasons as to why this world is so wrong, and the only person with the most narrative authority in any story would be God. With all her narrative authority, Eto gives her interpretation of God, that being a child with extraordinary power. Eto's words, whilst manipulative in many cases, hold a lot of weight. Her stories set Kaneki down the path he's on. Her role as the author of the story showcases that her word is as absolute as it gets. A child, born on February the 29th, his birthday only coming around once every 4 years. The child grew up in a secluded garden, and eventually placed himself into every major faction of the world, coalescing into a maelstrom of destruction. Nimura Furuta serves as the quintessential embodiment of the Tokyo Ghoul world. Literally having a hand in every major faction, he's the world is wrong manifested. The narrative duel between Eto and Furuta ends in Eto's defeat, fitting how the only one who could defeat the author was either the Reaper or God. Though, to be clear, I'm not necessarily stating that Furuta is God, more so a deific figure of the Tokyo Ghoul world as a whole. Every faction at some point or another has believed or does believe that the world is wrong. Furuta's most significant group alignment is with the clowns. Serving as the pseudo-leader of the clowns, he's the pinnacle of what they stand for. The world is wrong and we're fed up with it. Instead, we're just going to have a laugh, do a little bit of trolling. But why do the clowns, and more specifically Furuta, believe the world is wrong? The Washu, or V, are an incredibly powerful group of ghouls that essentially run everything. Operating as a sort of shadow government, they hold the reins over the CCG whilst never being in the spotlight. Rize belonged to this organization and grew up in a place known as the Sunlit Garden. Alongside her metaphorical counterpart, Furuta, both Rize and Furuta despised the fate imposed upon them by the Washu. Born to be no more than a machine to breed for the sake of the Washu bloodline, Rize yearned to escape, and did just that with Furuta's aid. Confined to seemingly a single estate for most of her life, Rize now had the entire outside world to experience. Where the two differentiate is in Furuta's lifespan being set. His time in this world was significantly shorter than others. He was on the bottom rung of the Washu. He would never make it far. Even though he received praise from the likes of Arima, he was still nothing. Furuta hated this fact. His disposability is the crux of his pettiness and malice. So he chased Rize, not out of a twisted sense of love like he states, rather out of an ontological envy. Rize was integral to the Washu bloodline. Furuta wasn't anything special. Furuta's psyche is the most trapped and imprisoned out of anybody. Rize's is the opposite. Alongside this compulsive obsession over his lifespan, he had nihilistic viewpoints from a very young age. Nothing has any value, it's all worthless. Likening the world to a toy chest, once playtime's over, that's it. It'll never open again. Furuta is very much still a child. His metaphors on life and death are that of a child's. His shortened lifespan digging that knife deeper and deeper. He decided to ruin everything. Chasing after Rize was set in stone, she had everything he wanted. And in his pursuit of Rize, he had solidified the chain of causality that had affected the entire story. Throughout the story, Rize is used as a major plot device. Her actual self and characters somewhat presented as a secondary. Her regenerative powers are an incredibly useful subject for science. Furuta collaborates with Kado to use her Washu blood, seeking to turn her into the dragon and destroy everything. Furuta states that he dropped the steel beams on her to keep her in hand, and that he feared her getting knocked up by someone else whilst enjoying her freedom. He despises the thought of her being used and violated by the Washu, yet makes jokes about the 101 Dalmatians, stating that she's going to bear lots of babies under his control. The way he explains his relationship with Rize is childish. Children often act on impulse, not thinking about their actions before enacting them. Furuta, and by extension the clowns, state they don't need any reason to do anything. They simply do. Since his time at the garden and where he stands now, he's the same person. Hasn't grown, hasn't evolved at all. A major parallel of the dynamic between Furuta and Kaneki is that Kaneki changes and evolves so much throughout the series, whereas Furuta is completely stagnant. His authorial counterpart Eto is somewhat similar, her major character goal and psyche staying the same throughout the series, though forced to evolve past childhood. Furuta stayed a child. Arima plays the role of the Reaper throughout the entire series, his only reprieve being in his dying breath. However, if his presence as a deific figure wasn't prominent enough, Furuta replacing Arima with Juzo works as a way to exert control, not only over an institution that Eto had her hand in, but also as a way to assert himself over a symbol the Washu cultivated. Rize devours any and all without a second thought throughout the series. The CCG, unable to view ghouls as anything but flesh-eating monsters. Ghouls unable to view the CCG as anything but sadistic hunters. During the prelude to the Dragon War, Kano states that he put the core of his research inside Furuta. Furuta, being the person who integrated himself into every major faction, is the representation of the core of the world. Its crux, stagnant, cruel, nihilistic, apathetic. As soon as that core is devoured by Kaneki, the world changes. This world is wrong because of people's inability to change. But we can't fault them for that inability to change. In a world where their fates are twisted by malice, a world where no matter how villainous a person may be, there's someone worse hiding in the shadows, where the influence of parents leaves their children with a sealed fate. The world is a parasitic relationship of stagnation. A dynamic that showcases this very well is in our first clash between the CCG and ghouls. Investigator Mado and Hinami. Mado, after losing his wife to a ghoul, fell into a deranged vengeance against any and all ghouls, prejudiced against them as pure, unforgivable, evil monsters. Murdering Hinami's mother right in front of her and eventually hunting her down, Hinami is pushed to retaliation. However, she does not want revenge. Her kagane is that of a centipede and a butterfly, adaptability and evolution. Hinami is one of the few people able to adapt and evolve to her circumstances and grow from it. Though she's not perfect, she isn't able to truly grow and spread her wings yet, stuck between half and half. Kaneki, however, becomes the symbol of evolution. Through most of the series, the animal imagery most likened to his character is a centipede, merely surviving and adapting. Kaneki's self-actualization is delayed constantly due to his inability to make choices, but by the end of the series, he's become a butterfly. Furuta is devoid of animalistic symbolism, an abyss for the characters to walk a tightrope over. Kaneki's no longer restricted to walk the tightrope. Having grown wings, he's finally free from that abyss. Although, to cement Furuta's only spiritual symbolism to be that of an abyss wouldn't be right. Showcased through his participation with the clowns, Furuta's thematic connections with medieval jesters helps to seal the reasons of why causality is twisted in Tokyo Ghoul. Jesters were often portrayed as warped reflections of the king, free to mock and take the piss out of them. For both Furuta and jesters, there's a distorted or even fake idea of freedom to their existence, whereas our King Kaneki's freedom is far from fake. Furuta is devoid of animal imagery because his entire essence is dependent on the king. He needs Kaneki to even exist as his own character. The irony of all ironies. Though, like I mentioned earlier, Furuta feels like the deific figure of the Tokyo Ghoul world. Reading through the story, once Furuta takes center stage as the main antagonistic force, the story just flows to his will. He's incredibly smart when it comes to manipulating the forces around him, but it feels like he's the story itself. Everything is laid out perfectly for him to take advantage of. The way events unfold feels twisted because of its blueprint. Furuta is the abyss that our characters must walk a tightrope across. Furuta's terrible parental relationship, the fate imposed upon him, his decision to revel in negativity are the fundamentals of what our characters see reflected in the abyss. Causality is twisted because the pillar upon which it is built and centered around is corrupted. Though I've mostly been talking about Furuta on a grander scale, not really delving into his actual character psyche, as that deserves an entire video on its own. An important distinction between Furuta the figurehead and Furuta the character is that the latter's answer to the world being wrong is actually opposed to it, in a sense. Where Amon was Kaneki's foil in the OG series because of their reasoning behind this wrongness, Furuta is stuck between the cope of the clowns and the cope of V. So he finds only one answer. There isn't one. It's all meaningless. Furuta exists as a character who has already arrived at the conclusion the others spend the series struggling towards. That meaning is opposed, not discovered. However, Kaneki refutes that. By saying that the world is, he doesn't just refute the fact that it's inherently wrong, he confirms that the world has meaning. Furuta's nihilism is akin to refusing that the world is wrong by negating the world itself. If it's all a playground without meaning, there's no actual world. So nothing is. So morality has no sense at all. It can't be right or wrong. As I mentioned earlier, narratives are weaponized in this story. Where Kaneki treats narratives as a bastion, Furuta uses them as props rather than structures. Furuta consumes narratives to prove that they're hollow. So, how is it that Kaneki, who endured so much, is the only person able to grow wings? What separates Kaneki from the rest of the cast? Why is he able to achieve such a state of being? Or what's the common thread for everyone else who's unable to see the world as Kaneki does? For Eto, for Arima, for Rize, and most especially for Furuta, they despise the hand life had dealt them. and more importantly, were unable to accept that hand. Eto tried to destroy the hand that had ripped her family apart, forced her and her people to live in a world not made for them in order to create something new. Arima was smothered, suppressed, and left in solitude by it, playing the part of the soldier his whole life against his will, only getting a singular breath of reprieve in his dying moments. Rize was to be put in a cage by that hand, her agency and life at the whims of others. She saw absolute freedom. Furuta's toy box was shot early by the hand and decided to destroy everything, his only reprieve being that his time was fun. Kaneki went through hell and back because of the hand he was given by fate, and yet he holds no hate for it. He accepts it and moves with it, rather than against it. Now, is this to say that Rize should have just accepted her fate at the Washu, or that Eto should have stayed down in the depths of the world? Obviously not. Whether their actions were the best choices they could have made is up to us, but regardless, they made real choices. The fact that Kaneki didn't make real choices is what led him here. The ability to have a disconnected view of himself thanks to his love for literature finally grants him the truth of choices. There's a very fine line between accepting fate and believing you have no freedom. Kaneki achieves what few can, accepting the hand he was dealt and striving forward with his own choices nonetheless. The world was wrong because people believed in that quote-unquote truth. Furuta, that mindset manifested, can't even understand Kaneki after his monologue. His mind is forever stuck believing that the world is wrong, a victim of his own belief. Though I'm mostly focusing on Kaneki and his individual change, there's a myriad of people who also undergo great change throughout the story. There's a clear duality in the way people change or grow up in the world of Tokyo Ghoul. The Ghoul wave, independence, and the human wave fitting into society. The most extreme examples of these are found in Eto and Arima. Eto had stayed completely independent for most of her life. Arima completely played his role as society expected him to, the Reaper through and through. By collaborating together and merging these blueprints, peace was no longer a dream but a real possibility. Their dynamic is an external representation of Kaneki in some regards. The balance and harmony found between ghouls and humans manifested. The truth in the world being wrong doesn't lie in it objectively being wrong or not. It lies in people believing in it and doing nothing to change it. Or worse yet, continuing to have a hand in it. Eto and Arima sought to change the world. Despite how terrible they were given something nice in the end. Arima had a legacy to leave behind. Eto was given one last fuck you to V before they were put in the ground. Furuta and Rize had nothing. Their deplorability gave them nothing, at least in a morally good sense. Furuta had fun at least, but their deaths and legacies won't be remembered, left to die in the filth and dark corners of the world. Kaneki almost succumbed to the same fate, drowning in the waste of Furuta's chaos, but eventually light came for him. Despite how cruel it can be, causality can be somewhat just. To those of you who stayed for this whole video, I'd like to thank you. It means a lot to me, especially since this is my sort of first actual video. There's a lot more I could have talked about regarding this entire topic, the multitude of characters and their entire dealings with the bad hands life had dealt them, not giving Kano his own section, so on and so on, but maybe I'll do something for them another time. Either way, once again, I appreciate anyone who stayed for this whole thing. I'd like to give a big shout out to Crip for helping make this video. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.